The principal was still holding the microphone when she turned toward me, smiled at the room full of parents, and said, "Let's all appreciate the effort of guardians like Mrs. Dawson, who try their best, even when their best simply isn't enough for a school like ours." 200 parents went quiet. Some looked at their plates. Some looked at me. And my grandson, Tommy, who was standing on the stage holding his science fair trophy, froze like someone had just stolen the air from his lungs. His eyes found mine across the banquet hall, and I could see his lip shaking. My chest burned. My hands went cold. But I stood up from my chair, walked to the nearest microphone on the reception table, and said clearly so every person in that room could hear, "Before you judge who belongs here, Mrs. Ashford, maybe you should explain where the scholarship money actually went." Her smile disappeared. Her face turned the color of chalk, and 200 parents leaned forward because they knew, right then, that this night was about to become something no one expected. But this story did not begin at the gala. It began 6 years ago, in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and grief, when my daughter, Sophie, squeezed my hand one last time and whispered, "Take care of my boy, Mum. Promise me." I promised, and I have kept that promise every single day since, even when it nearly broke me. Sophie was 31 when the cancer took her. She had been diagnosed 14 months before, and we fought it together. Every appointment, every treatment, every night when she was too sick to hold her own glass of water. Tommy was 2 years old. He didn't understand why his mother stopped picking him up. He didn't understand why she slept so much. He would crawl onto her hospital bed and pat her cheek and say, "Mama, up." And Sophie would smile through her pain and whisper, "Mama's resting. Baby, Grandma's here." Tommy's father had left before Tommy could even walk. He signed away his rights like he was returning a library book. No fight, no tears, just a signature and a closed door. So when Sophie died, it was just me and a 2-year-old boy with his mother's brown eyes and a laugh that sounded exactly like hers. I was 56 years old. I had just retired from 30 years of nursing. My savings were modest. My house was small, a 2-bedroom place in Cedar Falls, Iowa, with a porch that creaked and a garden that kept me sane. I thought retirement would be quiet. Instead, it became the hardest, most important job of my life. Those first years were brutal. Tommy cried for his mother every night for almost a year. I would hold him in the rocking chair, singing the same lullaby Sophie used to sing, and sometimes I cried too, but I made sure he never saw. During the day, I smiled. I played trucks on the kitchen floor. I made animal shapes with pancake batter. I read the same picture book 47 times, because it was his favorite, and because his mother had read it to him. At night, after he fell asleep, I would sit at the kitchen table and stare at the bills, and wonder how I was going to make this work. I went back to work part-time at a clinic. I picked up extra shifts when I could. My neighbor, Dolores, watched Tommy when I worked evenings. We built a life. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of love. And Tommy grew into the kind of kid who made you believe the world still had good in it. He was curious about everything. He asked why the sky was blue, why worms came out when it rained, why the moon changed shape. By the time he was 6, he was reading 2 grade levels ahead. His teacher told me, "Mrs. Dawson, your grandson is gifted. You need to put him somewhere that challenges him." That somewhere was Whitfield Academy, the most prestigious private school in our part of the state. It had a reputation for producing kids who went to Ivy League colleges. It also had a tuition that could make your eyes water. But they had a scholarship program, the Founders Merit Scholarship, specifically for exceptional students from modest backgrounds. I applied for Tommy. He tested in the top 1%. He got the full scholarship. The day that acceptance letter arrived, I sat on the porch and cried happy tears for the first time since Sophie died. Tommy was 8. He looked at me and said, "Why are you crying, Grandma?" I said, "Because your mama would be so proud of you." He hugged me and said, "She can see us, right?" I nodded. "She can see us." Tommy started at Whitfield that fall, and at first, everything seemed fine. He loved his teachers. He loved the science lab. He came home every day, bursting with things he'd learned. But I noticed something else, too. He stopped talking about the other kids. When I asked if he'd made friends, he would shrug and say, "They're okay." One afternoon, I picked him up and saw him sitting alone on a bench while the other kids played in groups. A mother walked past him. glanced at my old Honda, and whispered something to another mother. They both looked at me and looked away fast, the way people do when they've decided you don't matter. I didn't say anything. I just smiled at Tommy and asked him about his day. But I filed that moment away because a woman who has spent 30 years as a nurse learns to read people. And what I read in that parking lot was judgment. Then I met Victoria Ashford. She was the president of the Parents Association, and she ran Whitfield's social scene like it was her personal kingdom. Her husband was a real estate developer. She wore clothes that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. She had a smile that looked warm from a distance but felt cold up close, like a fireplace that's just for decoration. The first time we spoke was at the back-to-school mixer. She walked up to me, looked at my name tag, and said, "Oh, you're Tommy's grandmother. How lovely that you're raising him." The way she said lovely made it sound like a diagnosis. Then she said, "It must be so hard at your age." I kept my voice steady. "It's the best thing I've ever done." She tilted her head. "Well, we all do what we can." And she walked away to greet someone she considered more important. Over the next 2 years, Victoria made her presence felt in small, careful ways. She organized events, and somehow my invitation always arrived late. She created parent volunteer groups and put me on the committee that stuffed envelopes while her friends planned the actual activities. At the annual auction, she placed my donated baked goods on a back table where no one could see them. When Tommy won the 4th grade spelling bee, she congratulated him in front of people and then said quietly to another parent, "Scholarship children do try harder. They have to." Someone told me she said it. I didn't confront her. I just held Tommy tighter that night. But here is the thing that changed everything. In Tommy's 5th year at Whitfield, I volunteered in the front office. I helped with filing, phone calls, basic things. The school secretary, Linda, was overwhelmed and grateful for the help. One Tuesday afternoon, Linda asked me to organize a stack of financial documents that needed to be filed before an audit. "Just sort them by date and put them in the blue folders," she said. "Don't worry about reading them, but I'm a nurse. I notice details." And as I sorted those papers, something caught my eye. It was a disbursement report for the Founders Merit Scholarship Fund. The fund received donations every year, generous ones, from alumni and local businesses. According to the report, the fund had received over $300,000 in the last fiscal year, but the actual scholarships disbursed totaled only $87,000. The rest was listed under administrative costs and program development, $300,000 in, $87,000 out. That's a gap of over $200,000. I'm not an accountant, but I know what that kind of gap usually means. I made a mental note but said nothing. I didn't photograph it. I didn't copy it. I just remembered it because my instincts told me something was wrong. A few weeks later, I heard Victoria at a Parents Association meeting say, "The scholarship fund is thriving thanks to our careful management." She was the fund's chairperson. She had been for 5 years. Careful management. Those words stuck to my brain like a splinter. I started paying attention. I noticed that Victoria's family had recently renovated their lake house. I noticed that her daughter had a brand new car for her 16th birthday. I noticed that the program development costs never seemed to produce any actual programs. I told no one. I didn't have proof. I had a feeling, and feelings don't hold up in front of powerful people. So I waited. I watched. And I kept volunteering. Then came the night of the Spring Gala, the biggest fundraising event of the year. It was held in the school's grand hall. All white tablecloths, flower arrangements, and a string quartet. 200 parents, donors, and community members dressed in their finest. Tommy was being honored that night. He had won the regional science fair with a project on water filtration that his teacher called remarkable. He was going to receive a trophy on stage, and I had bought a new dress for the occasion. It was simple, navy blue, on sale at a department store, but I felt good in it. The evening started beautifully. Tommy stood on that stage looking nervous and proud, his hair combed neatly for once, wearing the button-down shirt I'd ironed 3 times. The head of the science department handed him the trophy and said, "Tommy Dawson represents everything this school stands for: curiosity, hard work, and integrity." Tommy looked at me and smiled, and for a moment, everything felt worth it. Every late shift, every bill I juggled, every time I chose his future over my comfort. Then Victoria Ashford took the stage. She was supposed to give a short speech about the scholarship program and thank the donors. She started fine. She talked about Whitfield's legacy, its commitment to excellence. Then she turned to look at me. "We have guardians like Mrs. Dawson in our community," she said, and her voice was sweet but her eyes were sharp. "Women who try their best, even when their best simply isn't enough for a school like ours." A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd. She kept going. "Let's be honest, not every family can provide the resources, the stability, the environment that our students need. We accept scholarship students as an act of generosity, but generosity has limits." Tommy's smile disappeared. I watched his hand tighten around his trophy. I could see his chin trembling, and I knew he was trying not to cry because I had taught him to be strong. But no child should have to be strong against cruelty from an adult. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger exactly. It was clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you've been patient long enough and the truth finally demands to be spoken. I stood up from my chair. The room went quiet. I walked to the reception table where a second microphone sat, and I picked it up. My hands were steady. My voice was clear. "Before you judge who belongs here, Mrs. Ashford, maybe you should explain where the scholarship money actually went." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the string quartet's bow scrape against a rest. Victoria's smile vanished. Her face drained of colour. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. 200 people stared at her, then at me, then back at her. I did not say more. I set down the microphone and walked to the stage. I took Tommy's hand, looked him in the eyes, and said, "You earned your place here. Never let anyone tell you different." Tommy nodded. A tear slipped down his cheek, but he stood straight. Behind me, I heard the room erupt in whispers. Victoria grabbed her own microphone and laughed, the forced kind of laugh that sounds like glass cracking. "Well, that's quite an accusation from someone who fills envelopes. Shall we get back to the celebration?" A few people laughed politely. But I saw something else. I saw the school's headmaster, Dr. Patterson, lean over to the vice principal and whisper something. I saw a board member pull out his phone. I saw Linda, the secretary, look at me with wide eyes and press her hand to her mouth. I took Tommy to our table and sat down. My heart was pounding now. I had said it. I couldn't take it back. And I didn't want to. But I also knew that powerful people don't let accusations stand without fighting back. Within minutes, Victoria was beside my table. She leaned down close to my ear, and her perfume was expensive, and her voice was ice. "You have no idea what you just did," she whispered. "I will make sure your grandson loses that scholarship by Monday morning, and I will make sure everyone knows you're a confused old woman who doesn't understand finances." I looked at her without flinching. "I understand numbers just fine, Victoria. 30 years of tracking patient charts and medication dosages will do that." Her eyes narrowed. "You have no proof." "Maybe not," I said. "But now 200 people have a question. And questions don't go away just because you want them to." She straightened up, forced her smile back on, and walked to the headmaster's table. I watched her lean in to Dr. Patterson, gesturing with her hands, shaking her head like I was the problem. "Doctor." Patterson nodded slowly, but his face looked troubled. Tommy tugged my sleeve. "Grandma, are we in trouble?" I put my arm around him. "No, sweetheart. We told the truth. The truth is never trouble." But inside, I was scared. Victoria had connections. She had money. She had the power to make our life very difficult. The next morning, I got an email from the school. It was from Dr. Patterson's office. "Dear Mrs. Dawson, we would like to schedule a meeting regarding your comments at last night's gala. Please come to the administrative office at 2 p.m. today." My stomach tightened. I called Dolores and asked her to watch Tommy after school. Then I put on my best blouse, the one I wore to Sophie's memorial, and I drove to Whitfield. The hallways were quiet. My shoes echoed on the polished floor. When I reached the headmaster's office, the door was open. Dr. Patterson sat behind his desk. Victoria sat in one of the chairs across from him, legs crossed, arms folded, looking at me the way a cat looks at something it wants to swat. There was a third person, a man I didn't recognize. He wore a grey suit and carried a leather folder. "Mrs. Dawson," Dr. Patterson said. "Please sit down." I sat. Victoria didn't look at me. Dr. Patterson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Ashford has expressed concern about your remarks last night. She feels they were defamatory and damaging to the school's reputation. Victoria spoke before I could respond. I've spoken with my attorney. What she said was slander, pure and simple. She accused me of financial misconduct in front of the entire community without a shred of evidence. The man in the grey suit nodded. I'm Mrs. Ashford's counsel. We're prepared to pursue legal action if a public apology isn't issued. My mouth went dry. I had no lawyer. I had no savings for a legal fight. I had a part-time clinic job and a grandson who depended on me. For one terrible second, I thought about apologizing. I thought about backing down. I thought about doing what I had done my whole life, absorbing the hit and staying quiet. Then I thought about Tommy standing on that stage, his chin trembling, trying not to cry while a grown woman told 200 people he didn't belong. And I thought about Sophie. Promise me, Mom. Take care of my boy. I straightened my back. I'm not apologizing, I said. I saw a disbursement report while volunteering in your office, Dr. Patterson. It showed over $300,000 received by the scholarship fund last year, but only $87,000 was given out in actual scholarships. The rest was categorized as administrative costs and program development. I'd like to understand what those costs were. The room went very still. Victoria's lawyer paused. Dr. Patterson's eyes shifted to Victoria, just for a second, but I caught it. Victoria's jaw tightened. That's confidential financial information. You had no right to look at it. I was asked to sort and file those documents, I said. I didn't photograph anything. I didn't take anything. But I can read, and the numbers didn't add up. Victoria leaned forward. This is exactly what I'm talking about. She's a volunteer who doesn't understand school finances and is now spreading lies. Dr. Patterson raised a hand. Let's everyone take a breath. He looked at me carefully. Mrs. Dawson, those are serious implications. I know, I said, and I wouldn't make them if I didn't believe something was wrong. Victoria stood up. This meeting is over. I want her removed from all volunteer positions immediately, and I want a formal apology issued to the Parents' Association. She looked at Dr. Patterson with the kind of stare that says, remember who funds this school. Then she walked out. Her lawyer followed without a word. Dr. Patterson sat quietly for a long moment after the door closed. Then he said something I didn't expect. Mrs. Dawson, can you describe that report in more detail? I did. I told him every number I remembered. I told him about the gap. I told him about the categories that didn't seem to correspond to any real programs. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he rubbed his temples and said, I'm going to ask the board to conduct an independent review of the scholarship fund. I've had some concerns of my own, but I didn't have anything specific. He paused. This stays between us for now. Can I count on your discretion? I nodded. But Dr. Patterson, she threatened to take away Tommy's scholarship. She threatened it to my face last night. His expression hardened. Tommy's scholarship is merit-based. It's reviewed by an academic committee, not the Parents' Association. She can't touch it. I felt my shoulders drop for the first time in 24 hours. Thank you. He stood and walked me to the door. Mrs. Dawson, I want you to know something. What she said on that stage last night was wrong. This school exists because of students like Tommy, not in spite of them. Over the next 3 weeks, things got harder before they got better. Victoria launched a quiet campaign against me. She told other parents I was unstable. She told them I had mental health issues. She told them I was a disgruntled volunteer trying to cause trouble. Some parents believed her. I would show up to pick up Tommy and feel the whispers follow me like shadows. One mother who used to smile at me started looking the other way. Another stopped replying to my texts about carpool. Tommy noticed. Kids notice everything. He came home one afternoon and said, Grandma, Tyler said, his mum said you're crazy. Am I going to have to leave the school? I knelt down so I was eye level with him. I am not crazy, and you are not leaving. Some people say mean things when they're scared of the truth. He looked at me with those brown eyes, Sophie's eyes. Is the truth scary? Sometimes, I said. But it's always worth telling. Then, exactly 23 days after the gala, I got a call from Dr. Patterson. Mrs. Dawson, can you come to the school tomorrow morning? The board would like to speak with you. The next morning, I walked into the school's conference room and found 12 people seated around a long table. Board members, the school's external auditor, Dr. Patterson, and in the corner, A woman I later learned was from the State Attorney General's office. Victoria was not there. Mrs. Dawson, the board chairman said, the independent audit of the Founders Merit Scholarship Fund has been completed. Your observations were correct. Over the past 5 years, approximately $940,000 was diverted from the fund through fabricated administrative charges and fictitious vendor payments. $940,000, nearly $1 million stolen from children who needed it most. The chairman continued. The funds were traced to accounts controlled by Mrs. Ashford and her husband. They used the money for personal expenditures, including property renovations, luxury purchases, and private travel. I sat there, feeling something heavy settle in my chest. Not victory, sadness. Because that money was meant for kids like Tommy. Kids who were smart and deserving but didn't have parents who could write checks. Kids whose scholarships were smaller than they should have been, or who were turned away entirely because the money wasn't there. The woman from the Attorney General's office spoke next. Mrs. Dawson, your account was the initial basis for this investigation. The Ashfords are facing criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. You may be asked to provide a statement. I nodded. I'll do whatever is needed. The news broke the following week. It was in the local paper, then the regional news, then it was everywhere. Victoria Ashford, beloved community leader, president of the Whitfield Parents Association, charged with embezzling nearly $1 million from a children's scholarship fund. Her husband was charged alongside her. Their assets were frozen. Their children were pulled from school events. The lake house renovation, the new car, the expensive vacations, all paid for with money meant for kids who had nothing. I didn't celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate about stolen futures. But something changed at Whitfield after that. The parents who had whispered about me went quiet. Some of them apologized. One mother approached me in the parking lot with tears in her eyes and said, "I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I should have listened." I told her it was okay. People make mistakes when they're surrounded by someone else's confidence. It takes courage to change your mind. The school restructured the scholarship program with independent oversight. 3 new full scholarships were funded from recovered assets. Dr. Patterson personally called every family that had been affected by the reduced funding over the years. Some of those kids came back. Some had already moved on. But the door was open again, and it was wider than before. Tommy asked me about it one night while I was helping him with his homework. "Grandma, did Mrs. Ashford really steal from kids?" "Yes, she did." "Why?" I took a breath. "Because some people think money is more important than other people's dreams, and they think no one is watching." He looked at his math worksheet, then back at me. "But you were watching." I smiled. I was. A few months later, the school held another gala. A new one, smaller, with no pretense. The board invited me to speak. I almost said no because I am not a person who likes stages or microphones. But Tommy said, "You should do it, Grandma. You're the bravest person I know." So I did. I stood in front of 100 people, and I didn't talk about Victoria, or the money, or the investigation. I talked about Sophie. I talked about the promise I made in that hospital room. I talked about what it means to raise a child alone, not because you chose it, but because life handed it to you, and you held on with everything you had. "My daughter asked me to take care of her boy," I said, "and every decision I've made since that day has been for him." When I spoke up at this gala months ago, it wasn't because I wanted attention. It was because a woman stood on this stage and told my grandson he didn't belong, and I knew, if I stayed silent, he would carry that with him forever. The room was quiet. I saw people crying. I saw Tommy in the front row, his eyes bright and steady. "The truth is," I said, "speaking up was the scariest thing I've done in my life. Scarier than working double shifts. Scarier than sitting in a hospital watching my daughter fade. Because when you challenge someone with power, you risk everything." But I learned something important. Silence doesn't protect your children. It protects the people who hurt them. I stepped down from the stage, and Tommy ran to me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "I'm proud of you, Grandma," he said, and I held him tight, the boy with his mother's eyes, and I whispered, "Your mama is proud of you too." Last spring, Tommy finished 6th grade at the top of his class. He's 12 now, tall for his age, still curious about everything, still the kid who asks why the universe is expanding and whether fish can feel sad. He wants to be a marine biologist. He keeps a notebook full of drawings of ocean creatures, and some nights he reads to me from it like it's the most important book in the world. We still live in the same small house in Cedar Falls. The porch still creaks. The garden still keeps me sane. But something is different now. I don't feel invisible anymore. And neither does Tommy. Sometimes, on warm evenings, we sit on that porch together and watch the fireflies, and he'll say something that sounds so much like Sophie it takes my breath away. Last week, he looked at me and said, "Grandma, do you think Mum sent me to you on purpose?" I smiled and said, "I think she knew I needed you just as much as you needed me." And that is the truth of it. The real revenge was never about punishing Victoria Ashford. She punished herself the moment she decided other people's children were less important than her own comfort. The real victory was this. A boy who was told he didn't belong, stood taller because someone stood up for him, and a grandmother who thought her bravest days were behind her, discovered that courage doesn't have an age limit. It doesn't expire. It just waits for the moment you need it most. Sophie, if you can hear me, I kept my promise. Your boy is safe. He is loved. He is exactly where he belongs. And so am I.